It's almost summer. It's only 3 weeks away. Are you ready? I know that I certainly am. I want you to picture that it's a warm morning. And maybe you're walking to your car or down a sidewalk or through a parking lot, and you glance down and you see something. You see a tiny green plant pushing its way up through a crack in the concrete. And it's not a garden, not in rich, carefully tended soil, not in ideal conditions with the perfect amount of sunlight and water and space, but through concrete. And there's something about that image that just stops you for a second. Something that makes you want to crouch down and take a closer look. Because that little plant had every reason not to grow. The conditions weren't right, the path wasn't clear, something heavy and hard was literally on top of it, and it grew anyway. And that's nature. That is what life does when it's determined to express itself. And that's also you. You have been that plant. Maybe you still are, growing in conditions that weren't ideal, finding your way around obstacles that should have stopped you, moving toward the light even when the light felt very far away. And maybe not always in a straight line, and not always in the way anyone expected, but you keep growing. Today, we're going to talk about what that growth actually looks like and what it feels like when you're healing. Because we want to heal, we are ready to heal, but maybe you don't start. Or maybe you started and then you didn't keep going because maybe you don't actually know what you're starting toward. Maybe nobody told you what healing feels like from the inside. And maybe nobody described the subtle shifts and the quiet changes and the small but significant moments that tell you something is different now, something is working. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to demystify the healing journey. We're going to talk about what changes first, what things take longer, and what it feels like in your body and in your spirit when healing is actually happening, even when it doesn't look the way you expected it to. And we're going to talk about how this season, this glorious, abundant, sun drenched upcoming season of summer, is one of the most powerful times to tend to yourself, to create the conditions for your own growth, to step outside and feel the earth beneath your feet, and remember that you're part of something natural and cyclical and beautifully, unstoppably alive. Because you are not concrete, you are the plant, and you are always going to find a way through. Welcome to Jyotindi, Journey to the Inner Divine, a sacred space for healing energy, emotional release, and soulful transformation. If you're ready to live with joy, ease, and purpose, you're in the right place. So let's start here, because before we can talk about what healing actually looks like and feels like, we need to talk about what most of us think it looks like and why that picture might be getting in the way of it actually happening. So here's something that I hear all the time. Women who know they need healing, and they say some version of the same thing. I've been doing the work, but I feel like there's still so much more to do. Or I'm waiting for the moment where everything clicks, where I finally feel like myself again. And I understand that so deeply because we have been fed a very particular story about what transformation looks like. We've seen it in movies, the dramatic breakdown in the shower, the single therapy session where everything suddenly just makes sense. The moment that the character looks in the mirror and has this visibly, undeniably profound shift, or the montage of growth that happens, but in about 90 seconds of screen time, and it's set to a really good song. And listen, those moments, they do happen. Pivotal moments do exist. In fact, I had a friend tell me about one yesterday. I'm not denying that. But for most women, most of the time, healing doesn't announce itself like that. It shows up in the smallest, quietest, most easy to overlook moments. And if you're waiting for that big dramatic version of it, you might be missing the real thing that's already happening right underneath your feet. So let's think about our plant pushing through the sidewalk crack. You didn't see it breaking through in real time. You didn't watch it happen. You may have walked past that spot 100 times and saw nothing. And then one day, there it was, already growing. The work had been happening this whole time. You just couldn't see it yet. And healing is a lot like that. It's happening in the quiet spaces between your big moments. It's happening in the middle of the night where your nervous system processes something that it couldn't hold before. It's happening in the conversations where you almost said yes out of habit and then heard yourself say, actually, no, I don't think so. It's happening in the moment that you catch a thought that used to spiral and you simply let it go. You might not have a name for those moments yet, and you might not have recognized them as healing, but that is exactly what they are. Now, I also want to be really honest with you about something else because I think this is one of the most damaging myths about healing. And it's not about what it looks like, but it's about what it is. Okay, healing is not the absence of hard days. It's not the permanent removal of pain or struggle or difficult emotions. It's not arriving at a place where nothing bothers you anymore, or where your triggers disappear, or where your past no longer has any weight or texture to it. That's not actually healing. That is numbness and maybe a little delusion. And like we talked about in previous episodes, numbness is actually one of the things that we are healing from. Real healing is not about feeling less. It's about feeling more and more safely, more presently, more connected to yourself and your experience without being consumed by it, more comfortable with your boundaries and enforcing them. It's not becoming a different person. It's becoming more fully, more freely, more authentically the person you already are. And unfortunately, it's not linear. And I can't say that enough. Healing moves in spirals, not in straight lines. You're going to revisit things that you thought you'd already worked through. Only this time, you might be on a different layer of it, or you might see it from a different perspective. Maybe you'll have one beautiful week followed by a really hard day. You'll make progress and then you feel like you've gone backwards. And I promise you, you have not gone backwards. You've actually gone deeper. So think about a tree growing around a fence. It doesn't grow in a perfect straight line towards the sun. It curves and it adapts and it finds its way around the obstacle, sometimes enveloping it and assimilating it. And the result is not a flawed tree. It's a magnificent one that carries the evidence of everything that it moved through and grew around and refused to be stopped by. That winding, nonlinear, deeply personal path is the healing journey. And the most important thing that you can do right now, before we go any further, is to give yourself permission to release whatever timeline you think you should be on. There is no finish line that you are late to. There is no version of this that you are doing wrong. You are a living, growing, beautifully complicated human being moving through one of the most profound processes available to us, and you are right on time. So I want to do something a little different. I want to describe some moments to you, and I want you to listen, not as information, but as recognition, because I have a feeling that as I describe these, something is going to say inside you, oh, yeah, that happened to me. And when it does, I want you to let that land, because what I'm about to describe to you are not small things. They're not coincidences, and they're not just good days. They are signs that something inside you is shifting. It's real, and it's something to recognize and celebrate and honor. So the first sign is the pause. You know that knee-jerk reaction that you've always had? The one that used to be automatic? Maybe it's a shutdown or a spiral or a snap. The people-pleasing response that kicked in before you even had a chance to think about what you were doing? One day, there's a tiny gap between the trigger and the response. Just a breath, Just a fraction of a second where you notice what's happening before you're already in the middle of it. That pause is enormous. Even if you still end up like you always do, that pause is your nervous system learning that it has options, that it doesn't have to go straight to survival mode, that there's enough safety now to slow down, even just slightly, and choose. Most people don't even notice when this happens. It feels too small to count, but it does count, and it's not too small. It's everything. The second sign is noticing the pattern without being consumed by it. There will come a moment, and maybe this has already happened for you, where you catch yourself mid-pattern, mid-spiral, mid-people please. And instead of being swept away by it the way you used to be, you watch it with the kind of awareness that you didn't have before. Oh, there it is. That's that thing I do. And not necessarily with judgment and not with shame, but just a recognition of it. I mean, at first it might come with judgment and shame, of course. I mean, at least mine did when I was working through this process. I was having a meltdown, but this time it didn't feel like me. It felt like a pattern that I had repeated many times before, but I didn't feel enmeshed with it. Like it was something that I was experiencing instead of something that I am, if that makes sense. And that witnessing, that tiny step back from your own experience where you can observe it rather than just live inside of it, that is healing happening in real time. That is the beginning of choice. The third sign is the boundary that surprised you. And maybe it wasn't even a big dramatic boundary. Maybe it was saying no to something that you would have said yes to out of guilt 6 months ago. Maybe it was ending a phone call when you felt that your energy was draining instead of staying on the phone for another hour. Maybe it was like speaking up about something small, something that you would have swallowed before. Or maybe you quietly slipped out of a party because you just felt like relaxing was going to recharge you better than staying out late. And afterward, you felt something unfamiliar. Not guilt or anxiety, something that almost felt like integrity, like you had listened to yourself and your body knew it, even if your mind was still catching up. That is a healing thing. That right there in that quiet, small moment. The fourth sign is a day where the heaviness lifts. And I don't mean forever, not dramatically, just a Tuesday afternoon where you realize that you've been humming to yourself while you made lunch, or a moment in the car where a song comes on, and instead of making you feel sad, it just makes you feel alive. Or an evening where you sit outside and feel the warmth of the sun, and for a few minutes, everything just feels okay. These moments will feel almost suspicious at first, like you're waiting for something to go wrong, like you don't quite trust them. But trust them. They are not flukes, they're not accidents. They are your nervous system practicing what it feels like to be at rest, to be safe, to be present without bracing for impact. And the more you notice and receive them, the more they grow. The fifth sign is feeling your feelings without running from them. This one is subtle, but so significant. There will come a point in time where something hard happens, maybe a disappointment or a conflict or a wave of grief. And instead of immediately reaching for a distraction or shutting down or going straight into fix it mode, you just feel it. You let yourself cry or be angry or sit with the sadness without immediately trying to make it stop. And then it passes. And not because you forced it to, but because you finally gave it enough room to move through you instead of getting stuck inside you. And that right there is one of the most profound signs of healing that there is. Because remember, emotions that aren't processed don't disappear. They go deeper. They live in the body and they wait. When you can finally feel something and let it move, that's your nervous system doing something it may have never felt safe to do before. Now, I also want to be honest about what things take longer because I promised you a real picture of this journey, and that means the full picture. The deep nervous system patterns like hypervigilance, chronic anxiety, and the ways that your body has been holding on to tension for years, those take time, like real time. And they take patient, consistent, and compassionate tending. Those relationship patterns, the ones that are the most deeply wired into how you give and receive love, those are going to shift slowly. And sometimes they get harder before they get easier because when you start to heal, you start to see things that you couldn't see before. And a lot of times, when you're on a healing path, it forces the people around you to face things within themselves that they aren't ready to face. And that can cause rifts. And you have your internal voice, the one that has been saying unkind things to you for as long as you can remember. That one requires a lot of gentle, repetitive, almost stubborn redirection before it begins to soften. But you know what? That's okay. That's not failure. That's just the nature of deep roots. Because here's the thing about a garden: the most beautiful, the most resilient, the most extraordinary plants are the ones with the deepest root systems. And roots take time to grow, and you can't rush them. You can't force them, but you can tend to the soil every single day. And then one day you'll look up and you realize what has grown above the surface is more magnificent than anything you could have planned or predicted or forced into being. So if you're somewhere in this journey right now, if you've recognized yourself in any of those moments that I described, I want you to do something. I just want you to acknowledge it, and not in a big dramatic way, just quietly to yourself. Just place a hand on your heart if that feels right and say, I am growing, even when I can't see it, even when it's hard, even when it doesn't look the way I expected. I am the plant in the sidewalk crack, and I am finding my way through. So now we understand what healing looks like. Those quiet, subtle, easy to miss signs that something inside you is shifting. Now I want to talk about your role in all of this, because healing is not something that just happens while you wait. It is something that you participate in, something that you tend to every day in small, intentional ways. But you get to choose to create the conditions for your own growth. And I love that garden metaphor here because I think it reframes the work in a way that feels so much more compassionate than the way most of us approach our own healing. We tend to approach ourselves like problem to be solved, or a project to be completed, or a broken thing that needs to be fixed as quickly and as efficiently as possible. We want the results and we want them now. And when they don't come fast enough, we decide that we must be doing something wrong, or that this isn't working, or that maybe we're just so far gone that none of this matters. But you would never treat a garden that way. You would never plant a seed on Monday and then dig it up on Wednesday because nothing's happened yet. You would never scream at a rose bush for not blooming in the winter, right? You would never withhold water from a plant because it wasn't growing fast enough for your timeline. That's ridiculous. You would tend to it consistently, patiently, with the understanding that growth has its own intelligence, its own timing, its own process that doesn't need your interference, just your care. So, what if you brought that same energy to yourself? What if instead of demanding results and measuring progress and deciding you aren't healing fast enough, you simply asked yourself every day, what does my garden need today? Sometimes the answer is water. Sometimes it's nourishment, something that fills you up and replenishes what's been depleted. Sometimes the answer is sunlight, joy, warmth, something that reminds you that life is not only about the hard work of healing, but also about the pleasure of being alive. Sometimes the answer is pruning, letting go of something, maybe a belief or a relationship or a habit or a story that's taking up space and energy that your growth desperately needs. And sometimes the answer is rest. Because here's the thing that our productivity obsessed culture does not want you to believe: rest is not the opposite of growth. Rest is growth. In a garden, Winter is not failure. Dormancy is not death. It's the season where the root system deepens, where the energy is conserved and redirected, where the plant is preparing quietly, invisibly, but powerfully for the explosion of growth that the spring will bring. Your rest does the same thing. The days where you cannot push, where you need to be still, where the most productive thing you can do is lie on the couch and let yourself be. Maybe you need a book or a blanket or a good cry or some long overdue sleep. Those days are not setbacks. They're just your winter. And winter always leads to spring. So I want to challenge something that I hear from so many women on this journey. And that's the idea that doing healing work means being in a constant state of active processing. Always journaling, always meditating, always digging something up and examining it. That, unfortunately, is just not sustainable. And honestly, it's not even how healing works. Healing needs integration just as much as it needs excavation. You do the deep work and then you let it settle. You make a breakthrough and then you give yourself time to live before you go digging up the next one. You tend to the soil and then you step back and let nature do what nature does. You have to trust the process even when you can't see the process. And speaking of trust, I want to talk about one of the most essential ingredients in your healing garden, and that is self-compassion. If the soil of a garden is what everyone else grows in, self-compassion is your soil. It is the foundation. It is the thing that makes everything else possible. Because you can have all these tools and all these practices and a bunch of knowledge, but if the ground that you're planting in is hard and critical and unforgiving, nothing will take root the way it needs to. Self-compassion is not self-indulgence. It's not letting yourself off the hook or making excuses or bypassing the real work. It's just simply treating yourself with the same gentleness that you would offer to somebody that you love. It's looking at the parts of yourself that are still struggling and saying, I see you and I'm not giving up on you. We're going to figure this out together. All right, I want you to do something for me right now. If you can, go to a window or step outside for just a moment. And I want you to notice the light. Not just that it's there, but the quality of it. The way that it falls differently than it did a few months ago. The way that it stays longer now. The way it feels on your skin, warmer and fuller. That is summer energy. And there's a reason that it makes us feel something. There's something that happens to us in this season that goes beyond the science of vitamin D and longer days. There is something almost cellular about the way the summer invites us to expand, to open, to take up more space than we did when we were huddled against the cold. Nature doesn't hide in summer. The flowers don't bloom halfway and then decide that it's too risky to open up the rest of the way. The trees don't hold back their leaves because someone might find them too much. The sun doesn't apologize for being bright. Everything in nature in this season is in full expression, unapologetically, abundantly, completely itself. And I want to ask you something. When was the last time that you were fully, unapologetically, completely yourself? And not the version of you that's managing everybody else's feelings. Not the version that's making herself smaller so that somebody else can feel more comfortable. Not someone who's performing or people pleasing or shrinking, but the real one, the full one who has opinions and desires and a laugh that fills the room and things that she wants to say and dreams that she hasn't quite let herself speak out loud yet. When is the last time that she got to show up? Because here's what I want you to understand about this season of your life. And I mean both summer and wherever you're at in your healing journey. You can bloom right now. You don't have to wait until you're fully healed or until you've done enough work. Not when you've finally figured it all out and tied it up in a neat little bow, but right now, in the middle of the process, in the middle of the becoming. In fact, I would argue that blooming is not a destination that you arrive at after healing, but it's something that happens in the healing. It's what healing looks like from the outside. Every time you speak your truth when you used to stay silent, every time that you choose yourself without apologizing for it, that is blooming. Every time you let someone see the real you instead of the curated, acceptable, carefully managed version of you, or take up the space that you were always meant to occupy, that's blooming. And you don't have to wait until you're finished growing to start blooming. Because the blooming is not in spite of the complexity, it's part of it. Every plant blooms while it grows. And of course, as plants grow, people look and they admire the blossoms. That's natural. But I know that many women, especially women who are healing from trauma, from years of making themselves small, from lifetimes of being told that their needs and their feelings and their full selves were too much, that visibility can feel dangerous. Being seen almost feels like a risk because the last time you were fully seen, maybe it wasn't safe. Maybe you were criticized or dismissed or taken advantage of, or just simply not received the way that you deserve to be. And that led you to hide, to curate, to only show the parts of yourself that felt acceptable and manageable and unlikely to cause a problem. Believe me, I understand that so deeply. And I also want to say that the world needs what is inside you, the woman that you are becoming, the one who is being tended to and grown and slowly, steadily bloomed into. She has something to offer that nobody else can. Her specific combination of experiences and wisdom and wounds and gifts and perspective, it's completely unique. There has never been another you. There never will be. And every day that you stay hidden is a day that the world goes without something that it needs. So this summer, I want to offer you an invitation to let a little more of yourself be seen. And do that in whatever way feels safe and true for you right now. Maybe it's just having a conversation that you've been avoiding. Or maybe it's starting a creative project that you've been putting off. Maybe it's wearing the thing or saying the thing or going to the thing or being the thing that you've been telling yourself that it'll happen someday. Someday is a season that never comes, but summer, that's right now. Okay, I know I've already covered so much ground today. We've talked about releasing the myth of the dramatic healing moment. We've named the signs that tell you that healing is already happening. We've explored what it means to tend to yourself with the patience and the love of a devoted gardener. And we've talked about what it looks like to finally fully bloom into the woman that you are becoming. And now I want to get really practical with you because I believe that healing doesn't only happen in therapy rooms and on meditation cushions. And it doesn't only happen in the big intentional moments of inner work and self-examination. Sometimes it happens on a sunset walk. Sometimes it happens when your bare feet touch the grass and something in your nervous system exhales in a way that it hasn't all week. Sometimes it happens when a song comes on and you dance alone in your kitchen like nobody is watching because nobody is. And for 3.5 minutes, you are so completely in your body and in the moment that every anxious thought and heavy feeling and every weight that you've been carrying just lifts. Healing happens in the living. And this season gives us some of the most powerful, most accessible, most beautiful opportunities to do exactly that. So let's talk about some of the ways that you can tend to your garden this summer. And these are not complicated and they're not expensive. And most of them are available to you right outside your front door. So first, get your feet on the ground, literally. I want to talk about grounding. Some people call it earthing, but basically it's getting in physical contact with the earth. So take off your shoes, find some grass or some soil or sand or some earth and stand on it with your bare feet. And I know that might sound almost too simple to matter, but there's actually beautiful science behind this practice. And it shows that direct physical contact with the earth's surface can reduce inflammation. It can help regulate your nervous system. and lower your cortisol levels. The earth carries a natural electrical charge, and when we make direct contact with our bodies, we sync to that frequency in a way that is genuinely and measurably calming. But beyond the science of it, and I always want to honor both the science and the soul, of course, but there is something deeply settling about feeling the earth beneath you, something that reminds you at a level deeper than thought that you are supported, that there is something solid beneath you, that you're being held. And for women who've spent years in a nervous system that's always bracing or always preparing for the next shoe to drop, the simple act of standing on actual ground and feeling it hold you is a lot more powerful than it sounds. So this summer, take your shoes off as often as you can. Walk on the grass in the morning, sit in your garden with your hands in the soil, or wade in a stream, or walk along the sand at the water's edge. Just let the earth remind you that you're part of something ancient and stable and deeply rooted. And you're not floating, right? You are grounded. And the earth herself wants to help you remember that. Second, we are going to let the sun do what the sun does. Can we talk about sunlight for a moment? Because I think that we have been so conditioned to fear the sun. And of course, yes, protect your skin. Wear your SPF. I wear it every day. Be sensible. But we've forgotten what the sun actually does for us. Sunlight is one of the most powerful natural regulators of mood, energy, and mental health that exists. It triggers the release of serotonin, which is your body's natural feel-good chemical. It regulates your circadian rhythm, which directly impacts the quality of your sleep. It supports vitamin D production, which is connected to everything from immune function to emotional resilience. And for women whose nervous systems have been running on high alert, natural light has a genuinely regulating effect that no supplement can fully replicate. But again, beyond the science, there is something about turning your face towards the sun that feels just incredible. Like saying, here I am. I'm alive. I'm open to whatever this day has to offer. So this summer, I want to encourage you to get outside in the morning as often as you can, even if it's just for 10 minutes. You can sit on your porch with your coffee or walk around the block before the day gets going or eat your lunch outside instead of at your desk. Just let the light in every sense of the word. Third, we are going to move your body like she was made to move. And I want to be really intentional about how I frame this because for so many women, and especially women who've been through some difficult seasons, the conversation about movement gets tangled up with diet culture and punishment and the idea that our bodies are projects to be optimized or something that's out of balance and needs to be fixed. That's not what we're talking about here. We are talking about movement as medicine, movement as joy, movement as one of the most powerful tools available to us for processing emotion and regulating your nervous system and coming back into relationship with a body that may have felt unsafe or unfamiliar for a really long time. Because here's something that is so important to understand. Trauma and difficult emotions don't just live in your mind. They live in your body. They live in the tension in your jaw and the tightness in your chest and the way your shoulders have been creeping up towards your ears for longer than you can remember. And one of the most effective ways to move that stored energy out of the body is to actually move your body. So let's talk about some of my favorites for this season specifically. The first one is, of course, dancing. Oh, dancing. There is something about music and movement together that just bypasses every defense mechanism and goes straight to your soul. And you don't need a class and you don't need a partner and you don't need to be good at it. You just need a song that makes something in you want to move and the willingness to let it. So you can dance alone in your kitchen while you make dinner. You can dance in your living room with your kids or your dog or with nobody at all. Just turn the music up in your car and you can let your body respond to it. Just let yourself be ridiculous and free and completely in the moment. That's not frivolous. That's healing. You can walk after dinner. This one is so simple and so underrated. A gentle walk in the evening, especially in the light of the summer evening, it does something really beautiful for the body and the mind. It helps aid in digestion. It lowers cortisol after the stimulation of your day. It creates a natural transition between the busyness of the day and the rest of the evening. And there's something about moving through the world at a slow, unhurried pace, noticing the gardens and the light and the sounds of the neighborhood settling that is just genuinely meditative. It's also one of the most accessible forms of movement there is. You don't need any equipment, no gym membership, no specific level of fitness. You just need the evening air and as much time as you have. And if you're up for a slightly bigger challenge, there, of course, is hiking. If you have access to trails, use them because hiking combines everything that we've been talking about today into one beautiful practice. You're moving your body, you're in nature, you're grounded, you're in the light, you're away from screens and notifications and the constant stimulation of modern life. And there's something about the rhythm of walking on uneven ground, of having to be present and pay attention to where you're placing your feet, that really helps pull you out of your head and into your body in a way that walking on a flat surface sometimes doesn't. It requires a kind of embodied presence that is deeply regulating for your nervous system. Also, the views don't hurt either. For me, there's just something about standing on top of a mountain that you just climbed, something that required effort and breath and presence, and then looking out at the world spread below you that just really puts things in perspective in a way that's hard to describe and impossible to forget because you work to get there and then you get to enjoy the view. It's just incredible. But beyond nature and movement, I also want to offer you some really simple rituals that you can do. If you need a refresher, rituals are small, intentional, repeated acts of meaning, and they are one of the most powerful ways that we can anchor ourselves into the present moment and signal to our nervous system that we're safe and that we're cared for and that we are here. So, first, you can journal outside. You can take your journal out to the garden or the park or your porch or your back steps. There's just something about writing when you're in the open air with the sounds of the world around you, the feeling of sun on your skin. It just helps open things up. Ask yourself, what's blooming in me right now? What am I ready to release this season? What do I want to call in? And what does my garden need? And write without editing, write without judgment, write like nobody will ever read it because they won't. This is just for you. Next is water. If you have access to water this summer, like a lake or an ocean or even like a backyard pool, just use it. Water has been used for healing and spiritual practice across every culture and every era of human history for a reason. It's cleansing, it's soothing, it reminds us of our own fluidity, our own ability to move around obstacles rather than crashing through them. And if you can float, definitely float. Let yourself be held by something. Let the water take some of the weight for a while. You can use the summer solstice as a moment of intention. The solstice is the longest day of the year, and this lands on June 21st. It's one of the most powerful, energetic moments in the seasonal calendar. It's the peak of light, the fullest expression of summer energy. And it's a beautiful moment to pause and set an intention for the second half of the year. What are you calling in? What are you releasing? What does full bloom look like for you? Not as a final destination, but as a direction to grow toward. You can also bring nature inside. Fresh flowers on your table, or a plant on your windowsill, maybe a bowl of fruit, even just opening the window so some outside air can move through your home. These small acts of bringing the living world inside create a subtle but a real shift in the energy of your space. They remind you at a level below conscious thought that you're part of something growing and alive and beautiful. And finally, I want to say something about all of these tools together. None of them require you to be further along in the healing process than you are right now. None of them require you to have it all figured out. None of them require you to have anything except a willingness to show up for yourself in small, consistent, loving ways. It's not a curriculum or a checklist. They're just invitations from the season to you, from nature to your nervous system, from the part of the world that is in full bloom right now, reaching toward you, offering its light, reminding you that growth is not only possible, it's inevitable for everything that tends to itself, including you. Now, you might be thinking, sure, it's easy to say, give yourself grace, allow yourself permission to be where you are. But have you ever tried that? It can be really difficult. We are so conditioned to be self critical and get caught up in that rat race. It can be a lot more difficult than it sounds. I get that. I feel that too sometimes. But if you're thinking to yourself, I actually want that, I want to heal. I want to just stop surviving and truly start living and blooming and becoming, then I want you to take this one step. I offer a free 30-minute call where we can sit together, just you and me, and talk about where you are at in your journey right now, the things that you're carrying, what this season is bringing up for you, what that might look like to move through it with real support and real tools, and someone walking alongside you who genuinely believes in what is possible for you. And there's no pressure, no obligation, just a real, honest, heartfelt conversation with someone who sees you, who believes in you, and who knows from experience that the woman waiting for you on the other side of this work is more magnificent than you can currently imagine. The link to book your call is in the show notes below, because I truly believe that you didn't find this episode by accident. You found it because the wisest, most knowing part of you led you here, because she has been quietly tending to something inside you and is ready to break through. So let this be the moment that you give her space to bloom. And before I go, I want to just leave you with this. Somewhere right now, there is a tiny plant pushing through a crack in the concrete, and it doesn't know how long it will take, and it doesn't know what it looks like on the other side. It doesn't know if anyone will notice or stop to appreciate what it took to get through. It just knows one thing. The light is up there, and it's worth growing toward. And so are you. I'll see you in the next episode. And don't forget, there is no path to happiness. Happiness is the path.